bigger too. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a live Purpose and Pixie Dust. Oh my gosh, I couldn't even remember the name of my podcast. Purpose and Pixie Dust podcast. I am so excited to have a special guest on the show today. Her name is Amrita Rose. And Amrita, please just share who you are, what you're all about. Tell us a little bit about, your back journey so we can learn all the things.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me on. I've been following your podcast and I'm super excited to be a guest because you
Yay.
talk to so many cool people and
I
you
do.
just have such a wide range and depth of conversation with everybody. So I was really looking forward to this at the end of my day today.
Aw. Oh, you're so welcome.
So
That is so sweet. Well, we're excited to talk to you.
yeah. So I'm Amrita Rose and I'm a life coach and career coach and Akashic worker and wisdom worker. And that means I work not only with positive psychology, but also with Akashic energy field. So there's a lot of pixie dust that goes into the work I do, as well as a lot of, like quantum physics and positive psychology. So it's kind of great mix. And I'm located out in Colorado, but I work with people over the phone and over video, so anywhere in the country. And really just helping people figure out, if they are stuck in life or they've lost the thread and they feel like, I used to know exactly where I was aiming in my life and I knew where I was going in my career. And now I seem to have, it's like disappeared somehow, helping people find that again. So that's what
I
I
feel
do.
like you will have a never-ending flow of clients to you with that as your niche, right?
Yeah, that and there's I mean, as humans, we're always growing, we're always changing, we're always trying to become something else and something more than what we are now, reconnecting with ourselves, I think, more deeply every time. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a purple. Wow, my language is gone
I know
too.
it's okay.
It's
It's a
it's
Friday.
the
We're recording
day.
on Friday.
Yeah,
It is.
Mercury just got out of retrograde and
I
we're all
know.
readjusting. So,
Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
yeah.
Okay. So how did you get started in that? Because I feel like or have you always wanted to do that? Like, I feel like little girl Amrita probably wasn't like, this is what I'm going to do, right?
No, I wanted to be an architect. It's really
Okay.
funny. But so I started out in academia. I was a photography and digital imaging teacher and teaching criticism and theory. And I've also been teaching Eastern forms of yoga and meditation for about 27 years now. I hate to admit how long.
Oh, that's it.
And I was at that point where I was like, okay, when I was 45, and I was like, okay, what do I want to do next? Because I don't really want to keep doing these things.
Yeah.
And a friend sat me down and said, hello, everything you've ever done is teach people how to see the world in a different way. Why don't you become a life coach? And that's literally how it started. Um, and so, I really got that's how I was like, "Oh, you're right." Literally, figuratively, I'm all about teaching people new perspectives, the options they have, the choices they have, and I always feel like a really proud parent when I'm working with people. So, yeah, so that was then I got trained and I've gotten several certifications in positive psychology and coaching and presence-based coaching and somatic coaching and energy healing work because I also love learning. So I try and instill that in my clients. So yeah, so it's been a 14-year journey as a coach
Wow.
and guide. I love the word guide.
Yeah.
That feels to me more like what I do because I've been on the path. I've made some really dumb mistakes. I've lived in my car. I've gone through a divorce. I still my ex-husband is still one of my best friends though. So we navigated that really well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's really, it's about learning. I mean, I'm 58 now, so it's like, okay, so let me hand some wisdom off to anybody who's not been through this stuff.
Absolutely. Well, and I feel as though almost everyone that I've talked to, it's just like this journey. And
Yes.
I love that because that's actually one of the things I say a lot in this podcast is like I'm not necessarily like all the way there and know all the answers, but I'm taking you on this journey with you or with me, and I'm going to share everything that I learn along the way because we're, like you said, we're humans. We're naturally pivoting and growing and evolving. And I think that's so cool that your friend was like, I think it's really obvious that what you should be doing. And you're like, oh, duh.
Yeah, it was a real oh duh moment for sure. I was like, oh, you're so right. And then So talk about, the way the universe supports us. Literally that end of that week, I got a call from a colleague at Kripalu Yoga Center who said, "Hey, I'm running my final coach training for certification. I want you in the room. Would you come do the program? You don't have to pay for it, but I will certify you if you promise to be here for 6 months." And I said, "Yeah, sure." So that
Yeah.
was how, and I was just in love with it because it's all the things I've really wanted to learn how to bring together,
Yeah.
and now I've gotten to do it for 14 years. So, and I just wrote a book, which I'm super excited about.
Tell us about the book. What's the book about? What's
So,
some things?
so it is called No Plaid Suits: How Not to Have a Boring Normal Life,
Oh my gosh, I love
and it's
the title.
yeah, and I love the cover. The guy who
What's it
did the cover, Atmosphere Press, put it out, and the people at there are fantastic. So I always give a big shout out to them
Okay, good to
because
know.
they did the cover design and they were fantastic.
That's awesome.
But it's a series of essays, and it's really all these quick essays that you can read, very practical, because I'm very practical about everything from how to cook when you feel like you have no food to how to deal with grief, how to end any relationship, how to feel more confident. And then things like, like one of the things I was talking about earlier with somebody this morning over coffee was one of the essays I wrote was about how being generous is completely selfish. And she's like, "What do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, when we're truly generous, like when we agree to do something out of a sense of obligation, the other person always feels that. And we have that energetic understanding of like, oh yeah, this person said yes, but they don't really want to be here. And we're also not being very generous to ourselves when we overcommit ourselves or we say yes, something that as business owners, especially women business owners, I think we're so in the habit of, okay, we have to say yes to everything. We have to agree, and we put ourselves fourth down the list, right? And so this idea of when we choose to say yes to a task or to helping someone out or to even to working with a client, we also need to be aware of what are we respecting in our own boundaries, our own time, our own schedules, our own worth. And so when we're really generous with the other person and ourselves, for instance, if somebody says, "Hey, can you help me out for this week?" If I'm really busy and I say yes, there's always going to be this weird energetic feeling, and I'm going to feel resentful, and they're going to feel it. But if I say, "My week is really busy, but I would love to help you for these 2 hours." And then I show up, I'm 100% present, and I know that I'm also being respectful of what I need for my business and for my life. And so that's where that generosity goes both ways. So there's one example of one of the
Wow,
things in
that's
the book.
really powerful, and
Yeah.
I love how, like, tactical that is. Like, that's such a quick fix that we can do, and it just completely shifts the
Yeah.
energy.
And it's really about being, respectful
Respectful.
of ourselves as women business owners,
Yeah.
and women in general. Like we have, whether we're cisgendered or not, any any female. I never know these days which term I'm supposed to use. So if I step on toes, I really apologize. But as women, whether we're cisgendered or we've come to this way of being in the world, we're always told that we're not enough. We're
Mhm.
always told that we have to be more passive or more careful, or we have to pitch our voices higher so we sound a little less frightening, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
And and all of these things undermine the confidence that we have in ourselves, in our business, and it also undermines the way we can show up in the world and really, what's the word I'm looking for? Really, uh, oh man, I'm seeing glitter. Like I'm like, think about like how to spread glitter, but really how to be enthusiastic about what we're creating, and to allow other women to do that too. Because when we do that, then we all get a lot more, right?
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, so everyone needs to go grab this book because that's just one tidbit, and I'm sure since it's a collection of essays, there are so many more in there. So we'll be sure to link that in the show notes and the description of
Yeah,
all.
and it's on Amazon, so anybody, or bookshop.com, I think too. So anybody can find it.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And
Yeah,
I do want to talk more about the book because I get questions about writing a book a lot. So I do want to come back to that. But
sure.
you started touching on the confidence piece in women, which I think is so vital, even for
Yes.
women who don't have a business, but then, it's like almost like an added layer that as women business owners, it almost has to be there for us to really be able to take our business to the levels that we want to do. So what
Yes.
are some ways, some tips that you have for us on how ways we can feel more confident when we are showing up in our business?
Yeah. So there are some simple ways, and I love being really practical. So I'm very practical about
Perfect. I
everything.
am too. I love it.
Perfect. Okay, so way number one is starting to pay attention to the language we use, not only to ourselves, but how we are using language out in the world. For example, how many times have you apologized just automatically for something that had nothing to do with you, right? And so here's a couple of challenges for every woman out there. Remove the words "I'm sorry" from your vocabulary. Unless you did it and you're really sorry for it, just take it out. So if you're in the supermarket, right, and you know how, like, you're going down the aisle and some other person is coming down the aisle, right, and you're like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Right? Just knock it out. Just, like, zip it, right? Try that and see what happens when you're trying to, show sympathy or empathy to somebody. Instead, you can say, "Wow, I'm really sad about that." Because then you're really owning the energetic and the emotional quality of it. But when we say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and we really had nothing to do with it, what we're learning to do is apologize for our existence. And we should never apologize for our existence.
I love that. I love
So,
that.
replacing "I'm sorry" with "I'm sad" when it's appropriate, right? Like, I'm sad your cat got run over. I'm sad about your job loss. I'm sad about this. You're empathizing with someone, and then you're with them in the same space rather than kind of being a little condescending, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry that that happened to you. So glad it didn't happen to me." Right?
So
Because that's the implication.
when you're saying this, it's so interesting because I don't know if you know, I'm a high school Spanish teacher also, so I speak Spanish.
Mhm.
Spanish doesn't have that. They
No.
have specific words for each of those things that you just said. So like if you're passing someone in the grocery store, it's one form of like an excuse me type deal.
Mhm.
But I'm sorry is saved for things that you are owning that um oh what's the word? I can't think
That we're
of
really owning it, I know.
the yeah, that you're
Mercury, we're
owning,
just
you're
gonna blame
owning.
Mercury for the
Yes.
language
Yeah,
problems
I
today.
know what's happening. But you are literally apologizing versus like if someone passed away, there's a different word. And
Yes.
so I feel like I'm a little bit more in tune with that just from learning that language. I have found myself like using the English equivalent of that versus I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And then it really sticks out to me when other people say I'm sorry. Like
Yes.
I have a family member who apologizes for everything and it drives me crazy. And I'm like, girl, like do not like this is not
Yes.
an I'm sorry. And it's so interesting because I definitely think it's also a very cultural thing for us here in the United States, or even like as English speakers, maybe.
As
Um,
English speakers,
yeah,
because I also speak Italian, and
okay,
in
yeah,
Italian, it's very different. You say "excuse me," you
mhm,
wouldn't say "I'm sorry."
yeah,
And, this culture, I mean, we really have, you know, I'm gonna knock the patriarchy for a minute because it's not just women, it's all of us have suffered under this idea that we're not enough.
mm,
And in order to keep the patriarchy in place, we have to think that we're not enough because then we work harder to buy more things to make us feel better, and
yeah,
that keeps capitalism going, right? So it's tied with money and economics, but it's this idea that, no, hang on a minute.
yeah,
What would happen if I actually felt like I was enough?
mhm,
Right? I don't need to apologize for my very existence, or
mhm,
I don't need to apologize, automatically. It's so automatic. Okay,
yeah,
so that's one
that's
tip.
okay,
Yeah. All right. So the second tip is remove the word "but" and substitute "and." So think about this. So think of what's a sentence where what's something that's happened in the last week to you. I'm going to use you as an example because you're here. What's something that's happened in the last week where you were like, "Oh, I couldn't do this because," or "I couldn't do this but," or "I thought about this but." Where Give me a sentence or
mhm.
something that's happened.
Um, I was going to do a podcast interview last night, but I had jury duty.
Okay.
Will that work?
So now say the same sentence, but substitute and for but.
I was going to do a podcast interview last night and I had jury duty.
Okay. So what's the difference in the feeling when you said those two? What'd you notice?
You're
And
like,
I know I'm putting you on the spot.
you're like owning it, that you're taking responsibility for it.
Yeah. Which felt tighter or more constricted and like you had less control over your own life?
Oh, definitely the butt. Yeah.
Right. So when we substitute and, we're actually stepping into the power role in our own lives.
Mm,
And we also can see more options, right? We
yeah.
don't have to say it's not an either or.
Mhm.
It's, oh, right, and this happened.
Yeah.
And then we get to choose what's the action I want to take next, right? Like lots of things happen all at once. So there's the second language piece.
I love that.
Yeah. So that will also
Language
change.
Self
Yeah.
is
All
like,
right. So we have substitute I'm sad for I'm sorry. Substitute and for but. And then the third one is completely remove the word just
ooh,
from
yeah.
your entire vocabulary,
Yeah. Yep.
right?
And that's
Because just it really is.
yeah, it's in there.
Yeah. And I don't recommend people trying to do this all three at once, right? Give yourself a couple weeks of pick one and just practice, because the more you notice it, the more you will be surprised at how often it pops up.
Yeah.
And particularly the I'm sorry one. That's a big one. And just, right? Oh, I just did this, or I just wanted to send you this. I just wanted to tell you. Take just out,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's such a minimizer of our
Mhm.
power, our gosh, yeah, the words are just out, right? There it is, right?
Yeah, our
The
strength. I
words
mean,
are
yeah, and your accomplishments. I mean, I ran my first and only marathon a couple weekends ago, and it was the Disney World Marathon. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they have the marathon. But if you do the 5K, the 10K, the half, and the full, like all in separate days, they call that
mhm.
the dopey. Well, a lot of people do the dopey, which I
Oh,
think
wow.
is insane. Like kudos to them. They're crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy cool. Not anything that is necessarily on my bucket list. But so I got in the habit then, because so many people I knew were doing the dopey, that they were like, well, what are you writing? I'm like, I'm just doing the half. And it was just,
Oh,
and it just really like, and
yeah.
so then I would use that in conversations with them. And then I caught myself in conversations with people who didn't even know what the dopey was and were assuming the marathon was the biggest
Mhm.
distance, saying, well, I'm just doing the marathon. And they're like, what do you mean you're just doing the marathon? Like, and they
Right.
were calling me out on it, which I was appreciative of, because then it was, in my mind, it was just making this huge thing for me, like not as big of a deal.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. I
Yeah.
was like, ooh, I need to stop doing that.
That's a good catch. And congratulations on running a marathon, because I will never do anything like that. So
Thank
I'm in
you.
awe of that. Yeah.
Girl, I'm hoping I have toenails after this. That's all I'll say. It was an experience, but it's checked off, and like I said, we don't need to do that again.
But seriously, some serious kudos for that, because that
Mhm.
takes a lot of training. I have friends who run and do marathons and half marathons, and I've seen the training that goes into it.
Yeah,
So,
it's intense.
yeah, so some applause,
Thank you,
own
thank
that one.
It
Yeah.
was definitely something, especially since I'm growing a business, I'm like, that gets to be one season. So that
Yes.
was, July through December.
Mhm.
Um, and now I'm like, now I get to go back to my business, really being able to focus. It's a whole, you take a whole day, a week just to run
Oh,
during
yeah.
the meeting. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. So I'm curious, can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
What's the lesson, or what are the top 2 things that you learned in training and running the marathon and completing it, that you're pulling directly into your business?
Oh, that's a great one.
I
Well,
couldn't pass that one up,
yeah, yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Gosh, so many things. Honestly, one of the biggest things that for me came out of it was I don't necessarily need to do things just because, like, I want to check them off, or, it was almost like an energy thing for me. Like, I mean, I'm not even kidding you. My training for this was rough.
Mhm.
And there were a lot I did not enjoy it. Like a lot of people are like, "Oh, just enjoy it." I enjoyed
Eh,
maybe 10% of it. And so looking back on it, yes, it's an amazing feat and, I'm glad I did it and it's done with, but I don't know if it was really like worth the amount of energy and stress and time. And so I kind of wish I would have listened to my body more and either put it off a little bit longer, or done it when a time when maybe I would have enjoyed it more.
Mhm.
So that one's kind of a hard one for me, but also my big my big takeaway is that I can do hard things. So,
Yeah.
it's a huge mental game. And there's your business is a huge mental game too. You're going to have days where you feel like not showing up or where you're like, I don't know if this is actually going to pay off, but I do have a training plan and it says it's going to work and I'm going to stick with it the best I can. And there are days when I don't, or I get sick or things don't happen, and you modify and you tweak and you're still able to get the outcome, even if it's not as fast as you wanted to get there. Like I still got through the 26.2 and it's the
Yeah.
same as the one who ran it in half the time I did,
Yeah.
so I think that was a big takeaway for my business too, like those two things.
Yeah.
um
And that
what
first one, even though it sounded negative when you were talking about it, it really is a positive because the flip side of looking at it is, oh, right, I can pay attention to what my body is telling me and I can trust what my body is telling me.
Yeah.
And if I'm getting the feeling that I ought to take a break, I probably
Mhm.
should take a break and come back fresh,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Come back
100%.
more rested. Yeah.
Yes. I'm curious, do you know your human design?
I have no idea.
Amrita, you're all about energy and all the things.
I
You
know. Well, I work with the Akashic energy, and I've had so many people over the years tell me, "Oh, you're what's the other one where they always give you a number?" Which I
Oh,
also
your Enneagram?
an Enneagram, right?
Mhm.
But I've had people tell me I'm 5 different Enneagram numbers. I'm like,
Oh,
okay, I don't know any of them. Yeah, and I
no.
don't know human design. There's just so many. There's so many different traditions. I can't.
There is,
Yeah,
there is.
yeah.
Human design though, you only have one because it it takes into account like your birthday,
Okay,
time of
I'll have
birth.
to look it up.
Yeah, I'll send you a thing because you can find it out for free. I'm just really
Yeah.
curious because I'm a projector,
Mm-hmm.
which one means that I like to coach and guide. So I'm kind of curious if that's what you are maybe as well. Um, but two is we really recharge during like we need the rest periods and we need like more of it than normal people or like the other people. I shouldn't say
The
normal
others.
than the
Let's call it
others.
the
The
others.
others.
Yeah,
Yes. And
yeah.
that came up for me a lot in the marathon training. Like I was working with one of my friends who's a spiritual coach, and
Mhm.
we were talking about that, how like projectors aren't usually endurance runners. Like they're usually, so she's like, your energy is probably going to be feeling super off for a lot. And she was so right. Like that
Yeah,
energy with, the type of person that I am. I'm like, that makes so much sense.
yeah. Well, and I have one for you. Do you know your Sparketype?
No, I don't. I've never
Okay,
even
so
heard of
I'll
it. Okay, what is this?
so this is a fantastic it's fantastic, and there is a free I'll send you the link and you can post it too. There's a free, um, very short questionnaire, but it's based in these 10 archetypes that Jonathan Fields, who has developed a lot in positive psychology, came up with, and they're called the Sparketypes, and they go from there's 10 of them. They go from the range of totally service oriented to totally process and outcome oriented.
Huh.
And so, like, for instance, I'm Sage Advisor, which is coaching and like to know everything.
Yeah, yeah,
So I learn lots and then I share it out with everyone I work with. And it's a really fascinating thing to apply, especially if you're looking at work. Right?
yeah.
It's really useful because and it will work with. It's not you don't have to like do Enneagram or Sparketype
Mhm.
or human design. It's useful to have this information from all of them and what chakra systems and whatever astrology you're using and whatever oracle cards or tarot, because you're going to connect. We each connect with the information system that works best for us.
Mhm.
And if we limit ourselves to one vocabulary, we're really limiting the capacity to understand the world through different perspectives, which is part of what we're here to do. So,
Right, right.
yeah.
So I'm curious when clients come to you for the first time and you're kind of if they're completely unfamiliar with the energy world,
Mhm.
where do you kind of get started with them? Do you have a
So,
certain place?
well, it depends on why they're coming to me. If they're coming for a healing or Akashic energy session, then they probably have a little bit of sense of what energy work is.
Right.
If they're coming to me for coaching, then the energy work just gets folded into the coaching work we're doing. It's not a specific call out, but I
Gotcha.
do pull, like, I have an oracle deck that I use, and I pull a card for each client right before each session.
Mm,
And it never fails that it's exactly the
right on.
topic that they
Yeah.
bring up, right? But I don't mention it until the end. I'm like, "Oh, and
Yes.
here's the card," right? Um,
Perfect.
yeah, and the energy work for me, it's always been information that just is there. And it took me a long time till my probably my mid-20s to realize not everybody gets this information. Like it is
Yeah.
there for everyone, but not everybody has gotten themselves out of the way or tuned in
Yeah.
or really has trusted it. I think as little kids, we often know a lot and then we get told, "Oh, you can't possibly know that," or "That's made up," or "That's your imagination."
Yep.
And I think it's a real shame because
Yeah.
what we've done is we've cut ourselves off from a lot of information that is actually existent, that happily now quantum physics is saying, "Oh yeah, no, this is real. Like the universe is conscious."
Do you think that also affects our intuition?
Yes. I think when we start to limit ourselves, we tell ourselves, "Oh, I can't do that," right? It's like how a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't draw." And I'm like,
Mm.
"Ooh, I can guarantee you I could get you to draw a chair in 5 minutes that you'd be happy with." And they're like, "No, I can't." And then you teach them, "Here's the 3 steps," right? "Here's how you see in a different way."
Mm.
And they draw the chair. I actually got a free dental visit one time because I bet my dentist. He said,
Nuh-uh.
"I can't draw," and I said, "If I can get you to draw that chair, will you give me a free visit this time?" And he's like, "Yeah, that'll never happen," and it did.
That's
So,
hysterical. I
but
love
it's
that.
really about, like, when we open ourselves up to what we are actually capable of, and we are capable of so much more than we have been told, or we're told that all of that this is the self. I mean, there's a whole lot. So,
We
that'll
could
be a
go
whole
on
nother
for
podcast.
hours.
Yeah, but it's really about, and to take it back to being very practical, when we start to think of ourselves as being unlimited and eternal and whole,
Mm,
and think about, how when we approach ourselves that way and we get to know ourselves from that level of like, I am unlimited, eternal, and whole.
I love that.
Wow. Okay, now what do I want to create?
Yeah.
Right.
I've used the word whole in my affirmations for probably the past 6 months or so, and it's
Mhm.
really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Like,
oh,
oh,
go ahead. No,
I was
no,
gonna say
go
it
on.
was something that I never even thought of doing before, and I don't even remember where I picked it up. Maybe my spiritual friend that I was mentioning,
Yeah.
um, during a breathwork session possibly, but it was great. I was like, "Oh, that makes so much sense."
Yep. That's that term, that those 3 words, infinite, eternal, and whole, come out of the Yoga Sutras
Mm,
specifically.
okay.
And so it's a really old idea, right? But
Mhm.
it's a reminder that, we're not broken. We have the answers, but mostly we've just been told,
Yeah.
"Oh, we're not. We need more, or we need this, or we need that, or we have to change, or we have to do this or do that." And that's really not true.
The grace, yeah.
And especially, again, going back to like this our whole culture teaches women that we're less than.
Mhm.
And we're always trying to have, we always are set up to compare ourselves not only to everyone else, but particularly we compare ourselves to other women.
Yep.
And when we see ourselves as a sisterhood and help raise each other up, man, we could take over the world.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I feel like that is a great place to go ahead and pause for today because, like, everybody needs to stop and rewind that because we can take over the world. Um, I feel like that needs to be part of, like, my mission statement now because 'cause I'm like, "Ooh, I love that." Like,
Oh
just,
yeah, I'm all
uplifting
for it.
and empowering, and I find myself saying that so much to my coaching clients too when we're working through something is like,
Yeah.
to try to get them to find that answer that I know they already know. Or
Mhm.
sometimes they'll say it like, I already know what I should do. And I'm like, well, what do you think that what do you think that next step could look like? And I remember hearing that from a coach for the first time a few years ago and kind of almost hating it because I'm like, oh, that's
Oh,
what I'm
yeah.
looking for, you know? And then
Yeah.
I got used to it because I'm like, she's so right. I do know, I do know what I need to do next.
Yeah.
It's just doing it and finding that confidence to do it, like you mentioned, and I really feel like that is a huge, huge, huge part of what is holding so many of us back from that next level, from
Yeah.
that top level of ourselves, is the confidence in ourselves and in our dreams and what, our abilities really are.
Yeah. And also it's easy to get stuck, a lot of clients get stuck up in the thinking like, what if in case ofs, right?
Yeah.
What if in
Yeah.
case of this? What if this happens? What if that? And I'm like, no, hang on. What does your heart want?
Mm,
Because it's really easy for the mind to be like a puppy and go everywhere.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you bring it back down and you just check in and say, okay, wait, okay, I have all these great ideas, and this is where I want my business to go, and this is how I want to approach it. And this is, how I'm excited about it. But okay, what does my heart want first?
Yeah.
And then what's the first physical action I need to take?
Mm,
And when we bring it back to that, it
yeah.
becomes a lot easier not only to see, oh, right, what's going to be in alignment for me, but also it makes it much easier to know, like, okay, so what is the first physical action? Do I need to make a phone call? Do I need to make a note? Do I have to email someone?
Yeah.
Right? And then what's the next physical action? It's so easy to get lost in like, okay, I got to do quarterly planning
Yeah.
and I have this whiteboard and it's, got 10 million projects on it and I don't know where to start and they're all really important. Okay, hang on.
What's
Let's,
first?
what does my heart want first? And whatever that is, that becomes the goal I'm aiming towards. And then, okay, what's literally the first physical thing I have to do?
First physical thing I have to do. I love that.
Yeah, always physical. That's the key.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, because it's so easy to think, oh, I need to do this. Okay, well, what's the first physical thing that will get you closer to that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Ooh, such good questions. Oh my gosh, guys. So you definitely need to save this episode and re-listen to it. And pep talk, or you find yourself going back and using those words that we learned are not helping us with our confidence. They are not helping us stand into our true power. So Amrita, how can everyone connect with you? And I'll put all this in the show notes so everyone can find you, but tell us all the places and all the things.
Yeah, so you can connect with me on my website at anunstoppablelife.com. You can also pick up a copy of the book through there. And there's a blog if you feel like reading. And there's also some free guided meditation downloads and lots of cool stuff if you sign up for my newsletter.
Ooh,
You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram at An Unstoppable Life. And if you're into videos, there's a bunch of videos on YouTube and unstoppablelife.com. So this has been such a pleasure, Lindsay. I love your energy. It's been so
oh, I
great.
love yours. Yeah, I feel like we could have talked for like hours and hours. I'm like, I like to keep these around 30 minutes for our listeners, but we might need to have you back on the show to talk. I feel like we could talk about 10 different things with energy. We still didn't talk about the process for writing your book. So I will have to send you an email and we'll do a follow-up maybe.
Yeah, I would love to do that. That would be really fun. Yeah,
Awesome.
and for all those burgeoning writers out there, I can kind of demystify it.
Yes, I would love that. Well, and it's so interesting because I've had a few other women who have written books on, and everyone's story is a little bit different. So
Hmm.
that's another thing I like to ask people because I know just from what I've heard, I've never heard anyone say that they have written a book and gotten it published the same way. So I'm like, I'd like to,
Yeah.
share with
Yep,
people.
and I never planned on writing one, so that's a place to start.
Yeah, even better. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And make
Thank
sure
you.
that you are listening to this or watching this, that you take a screenshot, share it on your socials, and tag both of us. And we would love to connect with you. So thank you so much.